I think the Pittsburgh Steelers can be true contenders, but they better figure out the offensive line. We'll break it down on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso, with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the mastermind, Ross Jackson. On today's episode, we're going to look at the biggest question for these teams heading into training camp. We'll talk about the Los Angeles Rams looking to reunite with Jalen Ramsey. The Miami Dolphins looking to get rid of Jalen Ramsey. But we'll start with the team that I actually do think needs Jalen Ramsey's help the most, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Before we dive into it, though, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, Ross, it's been no secret. I've been very forward about it, as I am with most things. As you know, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers can be true contenders. To me, the ability to be a true contender it is possible. Like the dominoes could fall in a way where you could be a true contender. So I'm not saying the Steelers should be favorites, but with Aaron Rodgers, who I personally think is a better player than Russell Wilson or Kenny Pickett or Mason Rudolph, he's the best quarterback they've had over the last few years. We know that they have a pretty good roster. Now you have DK Metcalf instead of George Pickens is kind of a one-for-one swap with Metcalf maybe being a little bit better, of course. But I like what the Steelers have. I think if Rodgers just plays solid football with the level of coaching and the level of talent on their roster that they have, I think that they can make a big push forward. But I do think that they need a little bit more help. And I look at the secondary. They just gave a contract to Deshaun Elliott like that. Minkah Fitzpatrick, one of the better safeties in the NFL. But Darius Slay is a guy who, on his last legs in the NFL. Joey Porter Jr., good player, but Beanie Bishop, is he going to step up? I think they could use some more talent in the secondary, and I think the Steelers are secretly the team that will be the most aggressive to go get Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, I think they very well should be. I mean, it's a franchise that knows the value of a star corner or having, a top level corner. And they also know the value of a guy. You go back to the Mike Hinton days where you have somebody that can play both outside and inside. And I think Jalen Ramsey fits that to a T, did that extremely well. And Brandon Staley's defense over with the Rams, for instance, all that. So I think he's somebody that can help you over on that secondary side in multiple areas. He's kind of getting to that point in his career too, to where people are going to start talking about like, oh, could he potentially make it as a safety? You don't have to worry about that conversation in Pittsburgh. You're good there. You can go ahead and use this guy sort of as a rover, move him around a little bit and everything. And so I think you're right. I think he could absolutely help out this Pittsburgh Steelers defense, who I think is going to, especially early on in the season, probably have to carry some games while Aaron Rodgers gets into a rhythm and gets things figured out and gets used to the players that he's now throwing to, things like that. And so having that strong defense there off the bat, I think would absolutely help them in terms of what their overall season projection looks like because of the impact it could have early on in the year.
And I think there could be an adjustment period. Something that I talked about recently on the show is I know Arthur Smith pretty well. Okay. I know his offense, what he likes to do. We saw it last year in Pittsburgh. We saw it in Atlanta. We've seen it quite a bit. But Aaron Rodgers does not necessarily run that kind of offense. Aaron Rodgers isn't necessarily the type of guy to do a ton of play action bootleg. He's 42 years old. He's coming off of Achilles. Like, it's not like he's a guy who wants to move around a ton. So there may be a little bit of a transition period there, like you said, where the defense will have to carry them. But one of the big things that I'm looking at, and when we turn the conversation to what's the big question for the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, I look at the offensive line. Can that offensive line take it to the next level? You lose a guy like Dan Moore in free agency, who was your left tackle. Broderick Jones, a former first-round pick, is now going to slide out there, and there's a lot of attention and a lot of eyes on Broderick Jones this year and whether or not he could take that step forward, and it's something our guys over at Locked On Steelers talked about recently.
I asked kind of what it was technically with Broderick, and Pat Meyer said it was like, on any given play, he would do 2 of the 3 things necessary that they taught him. He would have the footwork and the hand usage in tow, but then his pad level would swell. Or he'd have the pad level in the hands, and then his footwork would be crazy. Or he'd bend at the waist, or his hands would get wide. Like, it would be one thing that's just off, that's just forcing him to not be consistent. And there are flashes. I mean, go to the Washington game. He played incredible against the Commanders. I thought that was his best game as a pro. And you can see some of the flashes of what he could be. The thing is, where can you kind of put all of that together? The mental lapses, can those go away? Plus the technique. I think it's asking a lot for him to put everything together. So I'm not saying you need to see everything come together this year. What I am saying is we need to see a considerable step in the right direction that says, okay, this guy can be your future left tackle. And I think that's going to be the big thing. If he can be considerably better than he was last year, that's a step in the right direction. I think saying the light goes on this year and he becomes like a really good starting left tackle, that's a big leap for him because he was rough last year. So we'll see. I think that's pretty optimistic. But I think realistically, can you get the basics and some of the technique stuff consistency-wise fixed? I think that's realistic for him.
They take Troy Fautanu in the first round last year, not months ago, but last year. And he's going to be their right tackle going forward. I have confidence there. Really love Zach Frazier at center for them. What a great pick in the second round 2 years ago. So I like some pieces, but Broderick Jones has been that guy. I think they took him 14 overall. It was 2023 draft, and athletic, young, out of Georgia. These Georgia offensive linemen, these tackles, man, you looking at Mims. You go back to Isaiah Wilson with the Tennessee Titans, one of the worst first-round picks in the history of the NFL. These Georgia tackles, super, super athletic, but can they get the technique stuff down? Can they turn it around? To me, that's the biggest question for the Steelers as we head towards training camp. It's not as poppy and exciting as Jalen Ramsey or Aaron Rodgers, this and that, but that offensive line and protecting a 42-year-old quarterback, that will be absolutely key this year.
I mean, it's all connected, right? I mean, if there's a question you're going to have, if there's a position where you're going to have the most detrimental question at right now, it's the left tackle spot. Like, that's a big one to have a huge question mark lingering over when it comes to Broderick Jones, especially with, as you just mentioned, a 42-year-old quarterback that maybe isn't going to move the same way that he might have moved during his Green Bay days and all these other things. And so when you do have that question mark, that is a quarterback question in a way, right? Because if you don't have that play on the blind side at left tackle, you're putting your 42-year-old quarterback in a pretty tough position. And so I think that's a valid one, absolutely, to have, even though they have some really good pieces on that offensive line. Left tackle's a spot where if you have a question mark there and you have a right-handed quarterback, it could be a recipe for disaster no matter how good your other four are.
100%. And look, I think they're going to be a team that's aggressive for Jalen Ramsey. I wouldn't be shocked to see Ramsey on the Steelers. But Jalen Ramsey ain't playing left tackle. So they can add all the talent they want on defense. But if that offensive line, and specifically that left tackle spot with Broderick Jones, is a disaster, there's no overcoming that, in my opinion. Because Justin Fields was able to do that because he could run around even when pressure got on. And there's gives and takes with Justin Fields too, but Aaron Rodgers isn't going to run around like Justin Fields. But speaking of Jalen Ramsey, the Dolphins are just in a terrible spot. They're drowning, and they need to get rid of Jalen Ramsey as fast as they possibly can. And the Jair Alexander signing might make it more possible, but maybe not necessarily helpful. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, the NBA Finals are almost over, but hey, listen, there's still a few potential games left, and every single one of those games is going to deliver highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments, whether it's a game-winning shot, a breakout player. There's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Me personally, I told you, I thought the Oklahoma City Thunder were going to win this thing from the start, so I'm still going to back them now, going to hit the spread on the last game of the series. But regardless of that, if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Ross, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the big question remaining for the Pittsburgh Steelers as we head to training camp. It's definitely that offensive line, but I also think that the Steelers are a big-time player for Jalen Ramsey. And speaking of Jalen Ramsey, we got to talk about the Miami Dolphins. It is, again, no secret here that I think the Dolphins are in a terrible spot. The Dolphins are drowning, to keep the aquatic analogies going here. The team has fallen off talent-wise. Now Jalen Ramsey is, a black cloud hanging over the organization with his status. He wants out of there, but he's making too much money. It's very, very difficult. But the Jair Alexander move going to the Baltimore Ravens and the cost could kind of grease the wheels for a move to get made. And my guy Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins talked about that.
We're in a staring contest here. And when you're in a staring contest and the other party sees a corner come off the board that's an accomplished player for up to $6 million, they're probably going to pick up the phone and call you and be like, hey, dude, you guys want to pay a little bit more of this? Because we're not paying $21 million. So it's put the Dolphins in a tough spot in that regard. So while the Alexander domino giveth, it in this case explicitly with the Rams, I think also giveth away. Where if I were the Dolphins, and I understand if I was running the team, I would then have to pick up the phone whenever whatever is done and explain to the owner how he's going to have to write a check for X amount more money to get rid of a player that we just gave this contract adjustment to in the first place less than a year ago. And that's probably going to be a pretty awkward conversation. So I get why it's not done. I'm over it, right? And, here we are, another day that ends in Y, talking about Jalen Ramsey. And it's news because Ramsey's out working out in California, specifically at the UCLA football facility after not attending the offseason program and having an excused absence from OTAs, or an excused absence from minicamp. Then the question kind of becomes, why is Jalen in California? Is Jalen in California because Jalen wants to be in California? Is Jalen in California because he wants to be with the Rams? Is Jalen in California because he still has the house out there, which we saw him going through the home buying process during Hard Knocks in 2020 when the Chargers and Rams split it? Why is he out there? And it could very easily just be the simple explanation of, well, he has a house out there and he likes it out there and he doesn't want to be in Miami because he's ticked off and doesn't want to be in Miami.
Okay, the simple explanation still isn't good for the Dolphins, though. Like, that can be the simple, but what's the difference between the simple explanation and the complicated explanation?
Right.
To me, it's the same thing. He doesn't want to be there anymore. He's not showing up. And them giving him the excused absence tag
That
for
to me
mandatory
was
minicamp
wild.
sets such a terrible precedent within that locker room of you can pout, you can throw a tantrum, you can lay on the grocery store floor and complain, and we're going to cater to you. We're not going to punish you. Like, I think that the current Miami Dolphins, to continue using aquatic analogies here, like there's blood in the water here. Like the well is poisoned at this point. I just think this version of the Miami Dolphins is so far away from being anywhere close to as exciting and as optimistic as it was like 4 seasons ago going into that playoff game in Kansas City. I think that playoff game in Kansas City 2 or 3 years ago where it was really cold and they just played awful, it was just like, this team's never going to do anything. They're never going to do anything. And Ramsey, Teron Armstead retires. Tyreek Hill is constantly in a state of flux and what he's going to be like. Like, all of their best players are aging out and want to
Jonnu
get
Smith
out of there.
trade rumors.
Bradley Chubb.
Right.
I know I'm ranting and raving here, Ross. Bradley Chubb just said this week that last year when they said that the culture was different, they were lying. He even said, yeah, we were lying. But like, to come out and admit that last year you were lying about it different, but this year we're not lying. It didn't no.
Yeah,
that whole
right.
version of the Dolphins, just go ahead and kill it with fire. Like, Mike McDaniel needs to be fired. They need to get rid of the general manager. They need to get rid of these high-paid veterans. The team is not good enough to support it anymore. They're not all in to win. They need to start to tear things down. And I have a feeling, like most NFL teams, that they won't recognize it or accept it in time to spare themselves some heartbreak for a few extra years.
Yeah, I would say that they might recognize it, but it's the accepted part that's going to at least take a while to set in, or it's going to happen incrementally. And all these other pieces. Like, unless Jalen Ramsey is in LA because of a family matter or something like that, there was no reason to give him an excused absence if he was just gone because he didn't want to be there. Like, find the guy, do the thing, like, go through the process and everything like that. Like, there's no reason to not do this. And it leads me to what I think my biggest question is when it comes to this team, which is tied to the Jalen Ramsey situation and something you just kind of mentioned. Is Mike McDaniel a good head coach, or is he just another good offensive coordinator that got his opportunity too early? And I think we're learning that it's the latter. And listen, I'm pro Mike McDaniel, biracial king Mike McDaniel. I'm all about it. I want to see him succeed, everything like that. Like, no, you're not supposed to root for guys, but that's a guy that you root for. And you know his story, his background, all these other things. It makes you want to see him succeed. But he has not found the success in Miami that he was brought there to find. And how much longer are they willing to have that patience for a first-year head coach that made a big leap going from the position that he held with San Francisco into that? Because it wasn't like a traditional offensive coordinator, play caller position that he came out of. He was pass game specialist or whatever.
Yeah, pass game
at
coordinator.
One point. Yeah. And then he moved up from that to eventually landing his head coach spot and everything. And like, we saw the incremental leaps for guys like Clint Kubiak and others that have kind of maybe shuttered them a little bit more and put them in more advantageous situations. Now with Mike McDaniel, we got culture conversation coming out of Miami. You got players that don't want to be there. You got players that are retiring. You got a team that's not finding success. And so I think that's got to be the other big question mark. And I'm curious about how much this Jalen Ramsey situation ends up reflecting on guys like Mike McDaniel, Chris Grier, like these guys that are making these big decisions, because eventually change has got to be made. I expect that it will happen incrementally, but I wonder if the big move starts with Mike McDaniel at some point if this team isn't finding success during 2025 season.
Ross, I hate to bring the home cooking to the table, but this is the same conversation that in my mind is happening with the Tennessee Titans, Brian Callahan. He didn't have the success early on with Mike McDaniel, but it's like, hey, this guy's a really good play caller. He's getting guys open, like, that works. But the leadership, that's why guys like Dan Campbell, Mike Vrabel, Nick Sirianni, Mike Tomlin, that's why these guys have such a strong pull on these owners, because they see these whiz kid, scheme lord type guys like Mike McDaniel, and yeah, they can get all these guys open and it looks good when it's together and you're scoring points, but all the other stuff that you don't see out on the field, behind the scenes, in the locker room, can Mike McDaniel lead men? He's cool, but and it's not even saying that he cannot do it. Is he ready for it right now? These super young coaches that are just really respected wizards. Like, there's so much more to it. And I think that's why the Vrabels, the Dan Campbells are kind of having that renaissance where all these people want them. And you know what? You know who would be a great cultural leader, strong personality, get the most out of the vets? Brian Flores. Oh, wait. Sorry, Miami.
Right.
Yeah, that's you ran him out of. So, man, I hope that was a good, fun year of offense, though, that made that feel like it was the right move. Maybe not.
It is interesting. It is interesting that, to your point, like the guys that you named, Dan Campbell, Nick Sirianni, Mike Vrabel, I'll add in Dan Quinn, John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh. Like, these are not play callers. These are guys that are, we call them, they often get called CEO head coaches, right?
Yes.
They're those guys. And you look at the playoff teams from last year, the majority of the playoff teams last year were those guys leading the way. You look at most of the NFC championship, like the NFC bracket for the most part was littered with those guys. And so you wonder how much maybe teams are going away from like the play caller head coach and are really finding value in these more CEO types. Because as more teams shift to the CEO type, you don't hire the offensive play caller because you feel like you don't want to replace the offensive coordinator anymore over and over again, because the teams aren't hiring the offensive coordinators anymore. They're hiring the CEO types. And so I'll be curious to see where that trend continues to move moving forward.
It's one of the more interesting things to watch. And I think, honestly, Ross, if we're honest with ourselves, there is no better way. You know, you would have to do real
You're a good coach or you're not.
But you know, we see the downside of it. Mike Vrabel in Tennessee, unable to get the offensive coordinator and get the offense back on track after losing Art Smith. Look at DeMeco Ryans and what's going on with CJ Stroud right now. They won playoff games back to back, but we talk about the Texans like they're an embarrassment. You know what I mean? Like, because the offense is so bad and Stroud didn't look good, and we know that he's better. And now they got Nick Caley, and like, what's going to happen with Dan Campbell in Detroit now that he has to replace two head coach level coordinators on both sides of the ball who called the plays? Like, the downside of the CEO type head coach is something that we also have to watch in the next couple of years, because these things tend to be cyclical. But
we also know the NFL completely reactionary all the time. Yes. What's working most recently? Let's do that. And that's the way that these NFL teams go. So the trend will ebb and flow for sure.
Absolutely. But it will be interesting to watch what Miami does, because I don't think they're going to have a good season. I think, honestly, this is the last year of Mike McDaniel, in my opinion. That's going to be one of my predictions. He's a hot seat guy. But with that being said, someone who's not on the hot seat is Sean McVay, one of the best coaches in the NFL, will probably go down as one of the better coaches of all time, at least of this generation. And they're looking to get that old thing back with Jalen Ramsey. All right, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. No more singing, folks, I promise. But
that was really good,
with
though.
That being said,
you were on pitch, like you nailed that. That was great.
Hey, 13 years of choir, I still can't sing, but I know my pitches. All right. With that being said, though, Los Angeles Rams, big news in Los Angeles this week with the Lakers getting sold for $10 billion. That was huge. But the Rams might have some news around the corner as well. We heard earlier about Jalen Ramsey working out in Los Angeles from Kyle Crabb's Locked On Dolphins. A lot of that has to do with, yes, he owns a home there. He probably likes being there. Most professional athletes love being in Los Angeles. That's a big draw for them, so that all makes sense. But Jalen Ramsey also probably does want to go back to the Los Angeles Rams, and I think the Rams would welcome him back with open arms. The question now becomes, what would it take to get it done? And again, maybe the Jair Alexander deal can help grease the skids for that. But over at Locked On Rams, talked about some potential trade options.
That's a good deal for the Rams. Only give them a 7th-round pick next year, and you don't have to cover the additional money in Ramsey's contract. And that is a deal where, look, I mean, you don't look at it, okay, it's $20 million. You look at, okay, they're covering some of it. You're not giving them very much as far as draft capital. I mean, you got what you did in the Tre'Davious White deal, so it almost feels like money that you found under the couch anyway, a little $20 bill in the seat cushion. So I don't think it's going to break you. And look, the truth is, the biggest takeaway from this is it's widely accepted that the cost of Ramsey from a draft capital standpoint is going to be extremely on the low side. And the Rams, as far as being able to afford him, they can. So, I mean, that's just the most important thing with that, is they can afford him. So it's not going to cost a lot as far as the draft picks go, but as far as committing to money, sure, there's that. And that's the biggest hurdle. That's the biggest hurdle because you're bringing on a 30-year-old cornerback.
So the Rams technically do have enough money to absorb the $21 million of Jalen Ramsey's salary, but they only have $22.5 million of cap space. And Ross, as you know, that is not enough cap space for an NFL team to operate during the season. You need cap space for waiver claims, free agent signings. If you want to make smaller trades, like, you need the ability to add people to your roster throughout camp and the preseason and the regular season. You need more than $1.5 million to do that. So they would likely have to move some money around. But, I mean, they are in a place where they could, like, bring him in at least functionally and then move the money around and at least get it done. And I agree with Doug there. there is no way that a team is going to take on $21 million of Jalen Ramsey and give up high draft capital. It's not going to happen. And it may be difficult for the Dolphins to sell that to their ownership that, hey, we're going to pay some of this and not, but that's the gambit. Either you get a better draft pick and you pay a bunch of the money, or you don't pay any of the money and you get a terrible draft pick because someone's got to take the money. That's the choice that the Dolphins have.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not going to be able to get both. You're not going to be able to get the best of both worlds here. It's kind of like when people say, oh, that player is really bad, they should trade him for a third-round draft pick. And it's like, no, you can't have both. You can't have both. And so that's very much the situation that we're going to see here. Unless the Dolphins are willing to do something to where they, restructure his deal, pick up some of the guaranteed money, and then trade him or something like that to kind of get better draft capital. Like, there are little mechanisms that can be there that equate to the NBA's trading for cash thing.
Yes.
But I just don't see them being willing to do that. I certainly wouldn't be willing to do that. And honestly, I mean, your options are you don't have him or you do have him, and you get something or you don't get something. That's it. Like, those are your options. And you're probably not going to have him because he doesn't want to be there. We've seen the disgruntled wide receiver trades. We've seen the disgruntled this, that, and the other trades. The disgruntled cornerback trade for a 30-plus-year-old cornerback is not going to yield high draft capital one way or another. Like, it's always going to be pretty low. And so I don't think they're going to be able to get a big return for this, especially moving the contract. And having that contract the way that it is limits the amount of teams that can go out there and get in to bid and raise the price as well. So even from trying to drive the bidding war, the Dolphins are kind of cooked in that situation as well. So you're just going to kind of have to take what a team gives you, and you're going to have to like it.
Yeah, that's really where it's at. They don't have a lot of choices, and that is part of the problem of he's holding them over the barrel, and they said, oh, it's okay, excused absence, all of that, but we're just going to give you what you want. It's just a terrible, terrible way for the Dolphins to be. But the Rams are truly the opposite of that. Like, we talk about the big question for the Rams going into training camp.
Man,
my question is just how good can this team be? I mean,
100%.
Alec Jackson at left tackle has some health issues right now that create some uncertainty, and they brought in DJ Humphries, who the Chiefs had all those issues on the offensive line and did not want to go to DJ Humphries for a majority of the time. So that leaves me skeptical there. How good or bad they are on the offensive line, I think, will ultimately determine the ceiling. But I mean, this team just seems stacked. Did you see Teron Armstead, the recently retired offensive tackle for the Dolphins, talking about Jared Verse? He said Jared Verse was one of the main reasons he retired. He said that dude's going to be special. He said, he's going to bull rush you. He's going to get in your chest every single snap. You know it's coming. You brace yourself. You're ready. And there's nothing you can do. He said, I don't want anything to do with that young man ever again. I never got to see him again, is what he said. Like, it's part of the reason he retired. So I think Verse takes a major leap this year. I love the addition of Poona Ford, a guy that a lot of casual NFL fans don't know. Nose tackle, played for the Chargers last year. Really good. Kobe Turner, obviously good. Braden Finn. I mean, they have so much. If they add Jalen Ramsey along with like Devontae Adams on offense, the sky is truly the limit for the Rams. I would have them in a small group of serious contenders.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a rough calendar year plus for the Jared Verse haters out there, man. It has been a rough time. He was outstanding his rookie season. He's been awesome, and now you're hearing about all of it. It's been great. The question that I wrote down for the Rams is, what is their ceiling? And that's not because
how good can
that's
they be?
Right. It's not because I think, can they even be good? This is a good to great team. Right. This is a great to elite team, I would even say, when it comes to Los Angeles Rams this year. And this is just the cycle that this Rams team and this Rams organization has figured out. They are elite competitors. And then maybe the next year or maybe 2 years later, they're kind of middle of the road. And then they're elite competitors again. And their team building style, the way that they build their roster, the way that they manage all of it, to where they're dealing with these short-term deals, allowing guys to stick around on their rookie contracts, building homegrown, and then supplementing through free agency, which is ideally the way that you go in the NFL. It has worked every step of the way. And so to me, this season comes down to maybe the bigger not bigger, but maybe a lot of the onus comes down to like, can Matthew Stafford be healthy, right? Like that's got to be kind of the big thing. But you ask that for any team across the NFL, can the starting quarterback be healthy? So they're not in a unique situation. They are in a unique situation, though, in the case that this is a very, very good football team. And I think one of the maybe 5 best teams going into this year, going into the 2025 NFL season, for sure, for me.
I mean, yeah, I'm 100% on board with that. And I think you asked the question, like, what's their ceiling? How good can this team be? I think Super Bowl. They have a Super Bowl ceiling in Los Angeles. And, you know, you're right. It's not unique to say, hey, we need our quarterback to be healthy. But Matthew Stafford is a little more risky than your average quarterback, too, because of age and previous injury history. But at the end of the day, you're right. If he's out there and Sean McVay is calling the plays, like Sean McVay is the perfect example of he's the scheme lord, young wizard who also can freaking lead, man. He is baby John Gruden, in my opinion. It's just crazy to watch it. But yeah, if that's the question, which I agree that's the question, my answer right now is Super Bowl is the ceiling for the Rams.
Yeah, gotta be, especially if they're able to stay healthy. And I'll tell you this too, like any offensive line questions or anything like that, you got Sean McVay. Sean McVay is going to scheme. He's going to do his thing. That's going to allow you to be able to overcome deficiencies wherever those deficiencies might be, whether injury related or otherwise. And that's the X factor, man. Like when you have a head coach that can overcome for you on the offensive side as a player, boy, that's a comfortable situation to be in.
It's all about advantages. How many advantages do you have over your opponent? And pretty much every single game the Rams play, for the most part, I mean, with the exception of a few, they have a quarterback. If you add the quarterback and coach's talents together, they have the advantage with those two. Maybe not individually. Maybe Mahomes is better, and bad example with the Chiefs because they are the ultimate top of the mountain Mortal Kombat head coach and quarterback squad. But like, there's not many teams out there with a better head coach quarterback duo than Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay. And with all the talent they put around those two guys now, serious business. But that's going to do it for us today in today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Mastermind Ross Jackson. As I tell you every episode, thanks for tuning in and stay safe out there.